Story 1: The Call from Inside the House by Eleanor Graves. There are moments in life when you receive a phone call that changes everything. But what if that call came from somewhere it shouldn't have? This is the story of the Hartley family and the night they discovered that sometimes the most terrifying threat comes from inside the walls of the place you thought was safest, your own home. It was a Tuesday night in October when the nightmare began. Sarah Hartley was putting her 2 children to bed around 9 p.m. while her husband, Michael, worked the night shift as a hospital administrator. She was alone in the house, something she'd done 1,000 times before. The kids were tucked in, the doors were locked, and the security system was armed. Everything was normal. Everything was safe. Or so she thought. At 9:47 p.m., her landline rang. Sarah picked up. There was no voice on the other end, just heavy, deliberate breathing. Slow, rhythmic, intentional. Her heart skipped. "Hello? Who is this?" she asked, her voice already trembling. The breathing continued, getting slightly faster. Then, the line went dead. She thought it was a prank call, kids playing a joke. She tried to brush it off and went back to bed, but she couldn't sleep. Her skin felt prickly. Her mind kept replaying that breathing, how deliberate it sounded, how aware it seemed. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, when she answered, there was something worse than breathing. There was a whisper, just barely audible, so quiet she had to press the phone hard against her ear to hear it. The whisper said her name, not her full name, just Sarah, in a voice that sounded distorted, almost electronic, like it had been run through some kind of filter. Her entire body went cold. She slammed the phone down and immediately called Michael at the hospital. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial. When he answered, she told him everything: the breathing, the whisper, her name being called in that horrible voice. Michael told her to call the police immediately and that he was leaving work to come home. Sarah hung up and dialed 911. She reported everything to the operator, who advised her to get the children and wait in the car outside until police arrived. But before Sarah could move, something happened that made her blood turn to ice. The operator asked her a routine question. "Is your security system armed?" Sarah said yes. It had been armed all night. The operator's voice changed. It became more urgent. "Ma'am, I need you to listen very carefully. Your security system shows a door opened on the first floor, approximately 10 minutes ago." Silence. "Your front door was opened from the inside," the operator continued, "and then closed again. The motion sensors inside your house, they're detecting movement in your hallway." Sarah's scream was involuntary. She grabbed her children, ran to the car, and waited in the driveway with the doors locked and the engine running. Police arrived within 4 minutes. They searched the entire house with K9 units and found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of an intruder. Nothing. But when they checked the phone records the next morning, they found something that made them realize how close they'd come to something unimaginable. The calls hadn't come from outside the house. They'd been made from the landline extension in the basement. The one connected to the phone jack near the AC unit. The one in an area of the house that even Sarah had never gone into. The police discovered signs of fresh scratches around the basement door lock, consistent with someone picking it from inside the house. Someone had broken in. Someone had been watching them, waiting, calling, making his presence known piece by piece, slowly letting the family realize they were never alone. He'd been in their house the entire time. Story 2: The Road That Leads Nowhere by Marcus Holloway. Some roads have been dangerous for decades, but there's one particular highway in rural Canada where people don't just disappear. They arrive at destinations that shouldn't exist. This is the story of Highway 16 and the traveler who discovered something that authorities still can't explain. In March 2009, a man named David Chen set out on a road trip from Edmonton to Vancouver. He was a university student, 22 years old, taking a few weeks off to clear his head. He'd mapped out his route, packed his car, and told his parents he'd check in every day. The drive was supposed to take about 15 hours, but David had decided to take it slow and enjoy the journey. Everything was normal until he reached a particular stretch of Highway 16 in British Columbia, a long, isolated section that passes through dense forest with virtually no towns or services for miles at a time. Around 2 a.m., with the highway completely empty and dark, David started to feel uneasy. His GPS began to malfunction. ... The numbers didn't make sense. It showed him traveling at 120 kilometers per hour, but also showed his position moving backwards on the map. He slowed down, thinking maybe there was a technical glitch. But as he slowed, the GPS showed him accelerating. It was like the device had a mind of its own. Confused and increasingly unsettled, David decided to trust his instincts instead of the technology. He noticed something else that frightened him more. The road wasn't leading anywhere he'd been before. According to his printed map, Highway 16 was straightforward, but David had been driving for what he calculated to be about 45 minutes, and he'd already passed the same landmarks 3 times. The same abandoned gas station, the same dark forest, the same curve in the road. He was going in circles, but the road itself was straight. His phone had no signal. The radio played only static. And in his rearview mirror, he noticed car headlights. They'd been behind him for the last hour, maintaining exactly the same distance, no matter how fast or slow he drove. When he sped up, they sped up. When he slowed down, they slowed down. David's heart was racing now. He considered pulling over and confronting whoever was following him, but something in his gut told him not to. Instead, he did something desperate. He drove faster, much faster. He pushed his small sedan to 140 kilometers per hour on a dark, unfamiliar road. The car behind him matched his speed. Then David saw it. A sign. A highway marker that read, Highway 16, Welcome to Nowhere. Underneath it, in faded letters, was a mileage indicator. It said 0 kilometers to nowhere. And below that, written in what looked like spray paint, was a date. The date was from 1987. David slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder. The car behind him stopped as well, about 50 meters back. For several minutes, nothing happened. The headlights just sat there in the darkness, watching him. David's hands were shaking. He grabbed his phone again. Still no signal. He reached for the car door, ready to run into the forest, when something unbelievable happened. Terrified and operating on pure adrenaline, David accelerated down this new version of the road. After about 3 miles, the landscape shifted again. The old highway became new. The twisted trees became normal. The temperature returned. And suddenly, he burst out of the isolated section and saw city lights in the distance. He'd reached Prince George, BC. According to the highway signs, he was exactly on schedule. But when he checked his trip computer, it showed he'd only driven for 37 minutes through that entire stretch. It should have taken 2 hours. When he called his parents, they said he'd called them 3 hours ago from a rest stop. But David had no memory of making that call, and his phone records showed no outgoing calls. To this day, David refuses to drive that section of Highway 16 again. Story 3. The Passenger in Seat 4B by Lucian Vale. Commercial flights carry hundreds of thousands of people every single day. But on one particular overnight flight from Chicago to San Francisco in 2014, passengers and crew experienced something so strange that it has never been adequately explained. This is the story of United Airlines Flight 447 and the mysterious passenger in Seat 4B. Flight 447 departed Chicago O'Hare at 11:30 p.m. on a clear night in February. It was a regular flight with 176 passengers and a crew of 7. The flight was scheduled to land in San Francisco at 2:15 a.m. local time. Everything seemed routine. Passengers settled into their seats. The safety demonstration played, and within 30 minutes of takeoff, most of the cabin was dark and quiet as people tried to sleep on the red-eye flight. Around 1:15 a.m., the flight attendant Sarah Martinez was making her rounds through the cabin, checking on passengers and offering drinks and snacks to anyone who was awake. She was walking down the center aisle when something caught her attention. A passenger in Seat 4B was sitting upright in complete darkness, not sleeping, not reading, not using the seatback entertainment system, just sitting, staring straight ahead. Sarah approached and asked if the passenger needed anything. The person turned slowly to look at her, and when they did, Sarah felt something odd. The passenger's eyes seemed to reflect light the wrong way, like a cat's eyes in headlights. But that was impossible. She blinked, and the effect was gone. The passenger simply said they were fine and turned back to stare straight ahead. Sarah continued her rounds, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She mentioned the unusual passenger to another flight attendant, Miguel, who suggested They might just be tired or had taken a sleep aid. About 40 minutes later, Sarah decided to do another cabin check. As she walked past seat 4B again, she noticed something disturbing. The passenger hadn't moved, not once. In 40 minutes, they hadn't shifted position, hadn't used the bathroom, hadn't reached for the armrest, hadn't done anything except sit perfectly still and stare. She decided to approach again. Up close, in better lighting from the galley, Sarah could see that the passenger was a man, probably in his mid-60s, wearing a dark suit and no luggage. His skin was pale, almost gray. He wasn't sleeping. His eyes were open and fixed straight ahead. When Sarah asked again if he needed anything, he turned to look at her with those same unsettling eyes and smiled. Not a friendly smile. It was too wide. His mouth stretched further than seemed possible. He said, "Thank you for your concern. I'm perfectly fine. I'm just watching." Sarah stepped back, unnerved. She reported to the pilot immediately. The pilot came back to check on the passenger personally. But when the pilot reached seat 4B, the seat was empty. Completely empty. The passenger had simply vanished. The flight attendants checked the bathroom. Empty. They checked the cockpit. No one had entered. They checked the cargo hold through the emergency door. Nothing unusual. The passenger had evaporated mid-flight, as if they'd never existed. Confused, the crew pulled up the manifest. They looked for seat 4B specifically. According to the flight manifest, seat 4B was empty. It had never been assigned to anyone. But multiple crew members and at least 7 passengers had seen someone sitting there. The crew made an announcement asking if anyone had seen anything unusual. A young woman in 4C said she'd seen someone sit down next to her at the beginning of the flight, but she'd thought he'd moved. An elderly man in 3B said he'd briefly seen someone in 4B, but assumed he was still asleep. Everyone who'd noticed the passenger described the same thing. A man in a dark suit, pale skin, and those horrible reflective eyes. Here's where it becomes truly disturbing. When they landed in San Francisco and reviewed the security footage from the airport in Chicago, they found something inexplicable. The video showed all 176 passengers boarding. The count matched perfectly. But when they watched the footage of people exiting the plane in San Francisco, only 175 people disembarked. One person was missing. And on the flight manifest, when they printed a second copy, seat 4B now showed as having been assigned to a passenger named Robert Chen. But there was no Robert Chen who'd checked in at Chicago. No Robert Chen on any flight records. He was a ghost passenger who'd appeared on the manifest only after landing, as if reality itself was rewriting what had happened. ... The FAA investigated the incident, but never released an official explanation. The crew members involved in the incident were offered generous severance packages in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements. The flight was grounded for 4 weeks for unexplained technical issues before being returned to service. To this day, Flight 447 still operates the same route, twice weekly. Frequent flyers have reported an occasional unoccupied seat that seems to appear and disappear from the flight manifest. And there are rumors among the crew that seat 4B is always kept empty now, officially for maintenance purposes, though no maintenance is ever performed. 3 stories. 3 inexplicable moments when reality seemed to bend and twist in ways that defy explanation. The Hartley family was never told why someone was in their basement. David Chen never found out what that section of Highway 16 really was, and the passengers of Flight 447 were paid to keep silent about what they witnessed. Which of these stories scared you the most? Was it the invasion of the safest place on Earth, the never-ending road to nowhere, or the passenger who didn't belong? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new terrifying true story. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most frightening things are the ones we can't explain.